saw my review of Maybe Once, Maybe Twice, none of this will look unfamiliar to you. As promised, and this is my second review, fueled by a very good margarita and a little bit of determination. It's been taking a lot out of me to actually sit down and do these reviews. I do not know why, but here we go. 2 in a row. Let's have some fun with it. This book, They'll Never Catch Us by Jessica Goodman, proves that I am a masochist. I am a sucker for pain because we know I did They Wish They Were Us by the same author and loathed it. There's also a third book of hers on my TBR that I both do and don't want to read. And I think it's the fact that she's got good ideas. I just don't care for her execution. And I think that's why I still have her third one on my TBR, is because I'm hoping it'll be better than these two, but we'll find out. If it's not, I'm not wasting my time. This novel, I should have known I wasn't going to care for it when I learned that the major plot device was cross-country running, because how can cross-country running be interesting? It's not. However, all the reviews that I found were basically glowing except for 2, so I am in the minority of the opinion regarding this book. So take whatever I say with a grain of salt. These are just my thoughts and opinions, and I do try to keep them based in not fact necessarily, but more about writing than about my taste for subject matter or things like that. So hopefully this will be helpful / informative for you. As I said, it's about cross-country running. I will admit that I really didn't know what the book was about. But when the book opens, it becomes very clear that there was a serial killer on the loose in this town some odd years prior, and he went after runners. So I'm thinking, okay, serial killer murdering runners in the woods. They'll never catch us. Main characters are runners. Serial killer is going to be striking again. These girls are going to have to escape him. No. In fact, the serial killer in question, never 100% identified. There was an assumption as to who this person could have been, but it was never actually solved. Yeah, that was a huge letdown. Particularly because the crux, like the thing that gets the novel going, is the disappearance of a runner. It looks a lot like the murders, and we're thinking, is the killer back? Spoiler, no, he is not back. In a way, that's a red herring. But in my opinion, I don't think Goodman did a very good job at creating doubt. I thought the novel, just like cross-country running, was very slow. It took until halfway through, or maybe like 40% mark, for Mila to go missing. I read some reviews. One in particular said, I don't like how long it took for the pace to pick up, but I get it. We have to establish these characters. No, we absolutely did not have to establish them that long, that much. I thought when we first met Stella and we first met Ellie was enough. We did not need to go any further into the novel, or we did not need to go as far into the novel as we did before something exciting happened. I also did not like, so Ellie and Stella Steckler are the main characters of this novel. They are sisters, highly competitive. They have their own storylines going on. We alternate between the two until the very end when we get the murderer's perspective. I thought that came out of left field. I read a review and the person said, I'm so glad we got that perspective. For me, I thought the murderer came out of left field. And even though in retrospect you could see the breadcrumbs, I don't think the breadcrumbs were enough. A little bit of a spoiler here, I was never convinced that Stella or Ellie, although Stella was more of the focus of is she guilty, I never got the idea that either one of them could have been the murderer. Like, nothing they did made me say, are they telling the truth? Should I doubt what I'm getting from them? Are they being unreliable narrators? I think it would have been a good idea if we had gotten the murderer's point of view in there a little bit more. I think it would have ramped up the energy and the suspense, because I think it's Mary Higgins Clark, and I'm sure there's other writers who do it too, where they will put the murderer's perspectives in their novels, and that murderer very well could be one of these two characters, but we just don't know because it's a different tone. I thought if we had gotten the actual murderer in here a little bit more, it would have improved the novel for me, and it would have made it far more interesting, because it was so slow. It was painful for me. As I said, Ellie and Stella. Stella is the older of the two, Ellie is the younger of the two, but they're only about a year apart. Stella is the cross-country star with her own demons. Ellie is second best, and she has her own demons. I really didn't like either girl, but I thought Stella was the weaker of the two. I actually did prefer her to Ellie, because I thought Ellie was a little simple. I did not like how she handled her storyline, but Stella was just plain boring. It didn't help that the narration narrated her very monotone. She lacked enthusiasm. She was very stoic. So maybe I would have liked her more if I'd had a different voice in my head. But we open with her, summer is ending, and she is coming back from this camp. It's not like an anger management camp. It's not a running camp, but it is a camp where she worked on her running and her anger management, because she'd had an incident with another runner previously. She was on her way to Georgetown. Everything was lining up for her. But then she has some kind of incident with another runner, which sends everything spiraling. And then she basically has to go to this special camp to work on her issues. I'm going to spoil it right here and say she was not at fault for the incident with that other runner. That girl's name was Allison Tarley. And what Allison did was she framed Stella for injuring her. When she asked Stella to injure her, Stella said no, so she injured herself. She said that if Stella did injure her, she would tell everybody that it was an accident. Stella didn't do it on purpose. Well, you know what? Even though Stella didn't take the bait, Allison, she never told anybody the truth. I mean, except for the sheriff. I can understand why he jumped to this conclusion. I do not know why everybody was so willing to believe Allison. Yes, Stella was very driven and she was very no nonsense, but does that really relate to her injuring another person? Especially because, does she have a background of doing things to other people? Is there any reason that we need to believe Allison over Stella? That was hugely problematic for me, but it's a very heavy presence in this entire novel, because this injury ruins Stella's chances to go to Georgetown, because as soon as it happens, nobody wants to have anything to do with her. So we have her coming back from camp, and then we have Ellie. Ellie had been having an affair with this guy named Noah, who is also on the cross-country team. The problem is, Noah is dating another runner named Tamara. This is totally off topic, and I could be completely wrong. I listened to it. I could not get a physical copy, so I can't say for sure how this person's name should be pronounced. But their principal's name is pronounced in this audiobook as Perez. rather than Perez. Pretty sure it should be Perez. It drove me mad every time the narrator pronounced this principal's name. And then anytime the characters had to say it, I was just like, Perez. P-E-R-E-Z. I mean, like, it really, maybe there was an accent on that first E. Maybe it was actually P-A versus P-E. I have no idea. But it was driving me crazy. Anyways, she and Noah have been working, I think, like a water park together or something during the summer, and so they had begun to hang around and fool around. He keeps telling Ellie he will break it off with Tamara, but what he needs from her is, I think it's Yale. Her dad is, or Columbia. It's some kind of university that he wants her dad's pull to get him into. So he's not willing to break it off with Tamara until he gets that bid to the school. The only thing that I liked about this relationship, and it was truly heinous, but I liked the exploration of it, Noah was a complete gaslighter. And anybody could tell. So I liked that we as the reader were seeing this and we were recognizing it. But then I hated it for two reasons. One, I feel like it's just something that is too prevalent in novels and social media and just everything today. It's all about gaslighting, which I'm not denying gaslighting exists, but it's getting old in my opinion, and so I sort of wished that Goodman had chosen something else to be the problem. And then my other issue with it was Ellie, she completely let him gaslight her. Even when she wised up, she didn't wise up. And that was problematic for me because I wanted to root for Ellie. But she was the stereotypical weak girl who let a boy dictate her actions, even when she knew what he was doing to her. Ellie has this big secret, which I'm going to spoil. Noah got her pregnant. And then she had an abortion because she probably would have had it anyways, but he made her think, well, she's the only one who was going to suffer from it. Like, he had nothing to do with it, and nobody was going to care that he was part of it. This pregnancy and this abortion were all on her. This hangs over her the entire novel. It is something that she reveals to Mila because at some point she absolutely loses her stuff and she confronts Noah. He doesn't back down. He embarrasses her. She melts down. Mila is the only person who comforts Ellie. Even though Stella was there, Mila's the only person who comforts Ellie. She's just like, this is what happened. We have to suffer this entire novel with Ellie being gaslit by Noah and doing absolutely nothing about it. She does have this moment where she comes to the realization of what he's doing. She's not going to have it anymore. But then something else happens that I was like, how did incident B happen if she had already resolved to have nothing more to do with him? Maybe you can give me an answer once we get there. It's school, and everybody's like, yes, it's time to start running. Competition season is about to happen. Ellie and Stella are the top two runners, only for this other girl to show up. And this other girl's name is Mila Keene. Mila, honestly, I thought she was going to have more relevance, but apparently she's just a really good runner who is now in this town because her dad is suffering from pill addiction and her mom is like, I need to get away from him, so we are moving here. She is something of a threat to Stella and Ellie, but not really, and she's like this really great person. For me, I needed more about her to care about her before she disappeared. Stella doesn't like her, but Stella has the personality of cardboard. So, not surprised that Stella wants nothing to do with Mila, and she is threatened because Mila's better than she is. She absolutely is. Their first meet, Mila beats Stella. This whole thing happens with Noah. So before Ellie gets any sense into her head, Noah gives her this red bracelet, but he says, I don't want you to wear it in public. Wonder why. But she's running and she's like, I'm gonna do so well, only to then see Tamara wearing the exact same bracelet, and this literally trips her up, sends her to the back of the pack, and she barely finishes not in last place, and is surprised to see that Mila is the one who won, not Stella. So we have this whole back and forth with Stella of, do I trust Mila? Do I not trust Mila? We get some backstory with Stella because she's just an amazing runner. I think it was her freshman year, she was on the team and she had gotten involved with, I think it was like a senior girl during the summer, only for school to start and the senior girl to completely blow her off because she's dating somebody else on this team. But the whole team, there's this one route that they would run and it's super duper hard, but they don't actually run it. They get there and a mile in, Stella is the only one still running. When she comes back, she finds the rest of the team just boozing it up. They're making fun of her. This one guy in particular is getting on to her about why she thinks she's better than them and why she doesn't join in. He physically assaults her and she ends up with a concussion. Later on, the coach notices these symptoms and he's like, what happened? And she doesn't tell him exactly what, and this other girl that she had been involved with does nothing to help her. Nobody does anything to help her. This was a running theme. Ha ha ha, that's funny. I will say this unrelatedly related. In the end, the theme was misogyny. Where did this come from? Where all of a sudden it's about how the females in this town are oppressed. But she just realizes that there's no such thing as team when it comes to this team, and nobody's ever gonna back her up. Why we had anything to do with her and this other girl, I don't know. It wasn't terrible. I thought, because if we continued to explore her sexuality, it would have been fine. But we don't. We get mentions here and there. Towards the end, there's somebody that's introduced, but on the whole, her sexuality doesn't come into play. For me, that's when it feels like authors are putting it in there just to have it in there, rather than for it to be important, to be necessary. She doesn't tell the whole truth about what this team does. And personally, what we get from this coach and kind of what we get from him in the end, I wouldn't have put it past him to have known that they don't actually run this track, that they do party. Like, that's the whole thing about this one track every single year, and it's just the one opportunity that the team just, brings vodka in their camels and they drink themselves to, not to death, but they just get, have some fun. But she does say, hey, this guy did do this. She doesn't give context, but she's like, this is what he did. Apparently, this causes him in some form or fashion, he gets benched, which then affects the scholarship and his ability to perform on his collegiate team, which then causes him to quit and it just ruins his whole life. Wouldn't you know, that guy is the sheriff's son. So the sheriff has it out for Stella this entire novel, and for me that's also problematic because it's so one-dimensional and stereotypical, and I expect more from Goodman. She's not a bad writer. I can tell she's a mature writer. Do I like her writing style? No. Do I think she could craft her novel better? Absolutely. But she's got something. And I think she's a very intelligent writer. So why is she just throwing it out there that the sheriff absolutely hates Stella? And so everything Stella is encountering is because he's prejudiced against her. Why is it that we have the stereotypical sheriff? His son will get away with murder because he's the sheriff's son. This sheriff was unsuccessful in discovering who the serial killer was. He brought nobody to justice, so now everything he does is over the top to compensate for the fact that he's terrible at his job. And then the first person is a teenage girl. He's going to persecute a teenage girl because his son assaulted her? That was ineffective for me. He still could have been a prejudiced guy. He still could have been really bad at his job, but I would have preferred a different kind of motivation for why he's so laser focused on somebody that he shouldn't be laser focused on. Maybe he just hates teenagers in general. Maybe he hates his job. Whatever. I thought it could have been better. So Mila is trying to kind of ingratiate herself into Stella's good graces. And in some form of passion, I guess she was just trying to ingratiate herself within the team in general because this is her new reality. These are her new people. This is her new school. But I felt like Mila, in some respects, was a bit disingenuous. What's her ulterior motive? And then to learn at the end that Stella was kind of the only person she liked anyways, even though she was getting along famously with everybody else. It felt like she was a fence sitter. Be with the team and against Stella, or be with Stella but against the team. But it's kind of like she's the popular new girl in town, but she's gonna make an exception for the outcast. It didn't sit well with me. I did not know where she was coming from. She is trying to get in with Stella, and at some point Stella realizes, I may not like this girl, but she pushes me to be better than I am, so I can appreciate this girl. She has a moment with Ellie where Ellie reveals the secret of the abortion to her, but now Ellie tells Noah, or more accurately, Noah asks, does anybody know? And Ellie's like, well, I did tell Mila, which I'm like, why? Why do you have to tell him that? I get it, things happen in the novel, makes that important, but I still don't understand why. The next thing we know, there's this one girl so Tamara is kind of the golden girl. She has two best friends, Raven and Julia. Raven, her sister, so we had the murders, and then not too long after that, her sister Shira goes missing. Shira was a golden child. She was a star of the cross-country team, so everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, she has succumbed to the same fate. No. She had just ran away with a boy because she knew her parents wouldn't approve. This creates issues, and now Raven is just under this microscope. Raven is kind of, I don't know if she's actually third best. She did come in third to Ellie and Stella, but I don't get the sense that she's actually that great. We have her, but then we have Julia. And this whole novel, Julia is a mean girl for absolutely no reason. It felt like she was there because we needed an active antagonist. And so every opportunity she got, she threw Stella under the bus. She cast aspersions on Stella. She said, well, we all know that Stella is the murderer, that kind of thing. She was mean for no reason whatsoever. We were given a very flimsy excuse that she's just a mean person. That's just her personality, but I personally, and actually, I'd gotten it completely wrong. I read somebody's review who actually gave some details, and for some reason I had it in my head that Julia was the murderer. So when I had that in my head, I was like, okay, well, at least I can excuse this ridiculous behavior by the fact that she's just trying to shift suspicion off of herself. No, she's just mean. She's just mean. Julia lets it slip, or doesn't let it slip. Julia just outright reveals that Mila had met with somebody from Georgia Tech. This infuriates Stella. So she and Mila have a burgeoning friendship. Not anymore. She sends these really mean, threatening texts to Mila about how dare you meet with the people from Georgetown. Mila, one thing I do like about her is she's going to say what needs to be said. She's going to address the issue. And she approaches Stella and she's like, hey, the thing is, I'm just trying to get out of here, just like you. I'm just trying to get out of here. A little while later, Mila does not show up for practice. She does not show up for school, and it is deemed she is missing. Of course, who's the first suspect? Stella, because the search party goes out, Mila's phone is found, and what do you find on Mila's phone? Stella's text messages. So Stella is under suspicion, and one thing I did like was Stella did not let it get to her. She might have been suffering, but she did not crack under pressure. She just kept persevering. She was still boring as milquetoast, but I liked it. The next thing that happens that is supposed to help cast suspicion on her is that she opens her locker. I think she was talking to Tamara, and Mila's ID falls out. And then, of course, the next week we know the principal and the police are there, and they're like, we need to search your locker. But there's nothing in the locker. So now we're like, so this was one of the only interesting parts, but it absolutely went nowhere. This was not about all these things making Stella look guilty. This was the only thing that made her look guilty, because she was not an unreliable narrator. So it's not that she said, yes, I sent these texts, we hashed it out, we were fine, but that was only half the truth. No, that was actually the truth. Like, there's nothing to make me think maybe she lied. Like, maybe this perspective we're getting isn't actually the right perspective. Turns out that it was Ellie. Ellie knew what was going to happen if they found that ID in her locker, so she somehow got into this locker and she stole the ID. There's this whole sibling rivalry throughout the novel, and we see how, Stella's not a great sister. As I said, no personality. So she's not a whole lot of fun to play with. But then one day when she is forced to play with Ellie, she's like, I can be fun, let's race. And then she lets Ellie beat her. Ellie gloats, and at this point I'm like, I don't like Ellie. But because of all this stuff going on, and Ellie is 100% certain that Stella is innocent, they are starting to bond. And then they have this really great moment, only for what that moment was, I can't remember, but they had this really great moment where they stood together as sisters and they came to this understanding. The next chapter, or the next scene, is another race. Stella beats Ellie, and Ellie is incensed. She cannot believe Stella would not let her have her moment, only for them to get home. And who's the one who gets all the emails from the scouts? Ellie. Does at any point Ellie recognize, maybe I overreacted, maybe it was wrong of me? No, like, she admits Stella wasn't gonna let her win. That's not in Stella's nature. But she's petty enough and she's jealous enough that she's like, well, I need my chance to shine. Stella has already shown. But the thing is, Stella has to shine brighter than ever before because nobody wants to touch her. So why don't you let your sister do what your sister does best? If you're better than her, then we will see it. Until then, why does she have to let you win? I did not like this back and forth, this flip-flopping. I thought Ellie was really selfish and self-consumed. Also around this time is when Ellie sees the truth for what it is regarding Noah. She's like, he is never going to break up with Tamara. He has been using me this entire time. He's been extremely manipulative, and I don't want anything to do with him. I'm washing my hands of him. Which is when we're going to get into a little bit of a spoiler. I guess when he asked her who knew about the abortion, which I'm like, why does this abortion mean so much? Maybe he's projecting, and that is why he is telling Ellie that everybody's going to blame her and hate her about getting pregnant, and nobody's going to care about him. Maybe he's so afraid that him having gotten her pregnant is going to affect his ability to get into college, and so it's stressing him. I don't know why he cares so much, but he does. This is when he says, well, we need to convince Mila not to tell anybody. And Ellie goes along with it, which is why I get angry And I have no idea why she makes this decision, because she's essentially sworn him off. She has seen the truth, so why is she doubling back? I do not know. But he convinces her to convince Mila to get together. Also, in on all of this, it has been determined that there was somebody else on that trail with Mila on her phone, which, why did it take so long? I don't know. They found those text messages right away, so why did it take so long to find this picture? I don't know. But there is a picture of a girl, could be Stella. Stella's like, not me. She and Ellie have already lied about being each other's alibis, but this person, so Mila had taken a selfie. She'd gotten the back. It's a very grainy, blurry, like not good picture of the back of somebody else's head. Turns out to be Ellie. They are running on a trail, and then Noah shows up. And this is when Mila puts it together that this is kind of an ambush. This is something that they had concocted in order to get her to keep their secret a secret. Noah gets a little too aggressive and he pushes her into this pit. Also, by this time, Mila's body has been found. She is dead. So he pushes her into a pit, and Ellie's like, we can't just leave her there. He says, yes, we can. We are going to leave her, and we are going to tell her that we will not come back unless she agrees not to tell people about what we did. Did they murder somebody? All she did was get pregnant and not go through with the pregnancy. I don't know why this is such a big deal for him. I don't feel like it's that new of a concept in this day and age, but it's got him having all kinds of feelings. They go, and then when she doesn't show up, when she doesn't answer her phone, this is when Ellie starts to get nervous. She goes back to the trail. She finds Stella. At least I believe she does find Stella. At some point, she's the anonymous tip that said, hey, Mila was running on this trail. Whatever the case, Mila, at some point, died in that pit. Ellie and Noah are thinking, ooh, we're at fault. To backtrack a little, there is a charity run hosted, which I thought this was random. I just didn't understand this either. Literally, all of a sudden, well, all the girls have been banned from running by themselves. So we have state coming up, or playoffs, or finals, or whatever they are with track or cross country, but girls have been banned from running because Mila has gone missing, and it's hearkening back to the serial killer. Stella's like, I can't practice if I can't run. Instead of a practice, Tamara was like, we're just gonna do a charity run. Does anybody tell Stella? No. She shows up to school and she sees the flyers everywhere, and she goes to the coach. He's like, yeah, Tamara put this together. And Tamara is very wealthy, by the way, which will sort of come into play, but not really. Stella gets to the track and she's like, you know what Mila would want me to do? She would want me to give it my all. So she gives it her all, and she does exceptionally well, only for her coach to get so pissy with her because she actually tried, and he had already told her that she needs to not draw attention to herself. By doing so well, it's going to make her look bad. He gets so angry at her. So she's kind of keeping her distance from the team. Noah decides that he's going to throw a Halloween party. And he's allowed to throw this Halloween party because he has promised to donate all proceeds to Mila's mother to pay for a private investigator. It's at this Halloween party that news breaks that Mila's body has been discovered. The team obviously is like, who done it? Stella connects, I think her name is Naomi. Stella connects with Mila's best friend. She had seen a really weird comment on a social media post about Mila coming home to him, and she's like, I bet you this is the dad. I bet you the dad has something to do with this. And this is where I was like, did we turn into Nancy Drew? All of a sudden, someone's actually doing something. And I felt, so in novels, you have the reactionary and then you have the actionary. So the first half of the novel is when things tend to happen to the main characters, and then the second half is when the characters start to take action for themselves and they take things into their own hands to actually make improvements and steps forward so we can get to a resolution. There was nothing but reactionary in this entire novel, except for this one moment in time where Stella wants to play Nancy Drew, hunt down Mila's dad. So they had connected because her mother was an alcoholic. So obviously with Mila's dad being addicted to pills, so she's like, he's got answers. Well, no, he has absolutely no answers. He did leave that comment, but he had been in rehab the entire time, so he could not be at fault for whatever happened to Mila. But she's just like, something's not adding up here. There's no way that Mila could have died from a head wound by just falling into a pit. She doesn't know this until Ellie decides to stay home from school. Noah comes to the house and he is, I don't know, getting like verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, and then he gets physically abusive. Wouldn't you know, Stella had forgotten her school book, so she stumbles across this situation. Ellie and Noah reveal what their part in Mila's disappearance was, but Stella's like, if all you did was push her into a pit and she was alive when you left her there, it doesn't add up that she would have died from a head wound. What you're telling me does not line up with somebody having a traumatic enough head wound. This is also, I thought, was really strange because Noah just breaks down and all of a sudden he is just this weak person who is weepy and is a victim, and very uncharacteristic in my opinion. Not long after this, so at some point, so I know what it is, the sheriff reapproaches Stella once they find the picture on that phone. He shows her the picture, at which point she automatically knows it's her sister. My question is, did he only think it was Stella because he thinks Stella is the murderer, or can he not tell the difference between the girls? Could it really just have looked like any girl, but because she knows her sister? Because we've had a handful of mentions about the fact that Ellie has frizzy hair when she's running outside. I'm like, I have frizzy hair sitting inside. Frizzy hair really isn't that distinguishing characteristic, but because like she automatically knows it's Ellie. So she knows something's going on. Ellie was involved. This is also obviously before Ellie and Noah reveal everything. But Ellie comes to her right after she gets back from this adventure with Naomi when they track down the dad. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we are going to have a moment, because Stella is like, when is she going to tell me? When is she going to be honest with me? We're working on this whole sisterhood thing. Like, at what point are they going to start being honest with each other? Well, no, completely different direction. Ellie is like, I found something that you need to see. What did she find? She found Allison Tarley. She found a blog post written by her admitting to her own guilt. Does anybody apologize to Stella? Is there anything done about the fact that the truth is out there and all of these scouts who pulled away from Stella because of their judgment calls? Does anything happen? No. People still don't want to have anything to do with Stella. Then what happens is after Ellie and Noah reveal their part in Mila's disappearance, the cross-country team, and I'm just like, this cross-country team feels so incestuous to me. The bond they have, maybe that's really how it is in certain situations with certain sporting groups. I don't know. Maybe because of things they've gone through with a serial killer being in their town. They're just extra tight. I wouldn't really know. But they have met again on the grounds of Tamara. So Tamara's family is wealthy because they own, like, it's a hotel vineyard kind of deal. And apparently a lot of things take place on these grounds. They are meeting on these grounds, and this is also close to where that trail had been. And they're still trying to figure out what in the heck happened to Mila. They're thinking about it, and well, first off, Julia's like, why in the world did you bring Stella? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Julia, get over yourself. They're throwing out theories, and Stella, she says, it just doesn't add up. Because Ellie and Noah fess up to, one, their affair / abortion, to the part that they played in Mila's disappearance. At which point, Tamara's like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I knew he was messing around. He's not a good liar. Like, I knew he was messing around with someone. I just didn't realize it was you. I didn't break up with him because I know he's using me for my dad, but I didn't break up with him because he and his friend were going to make my life a living hell if I did. And he's like, no, we wouldn't. She's like, yeah, you. And so this whole other can of worms is being opened because now it's about the fact that she's African American. We do get a number of references. I think at the very beginning we are told her ethnicity, and her braids are mentioned more than once, but she is a non-entity in this entire thing. I would have loved, I enjoyed her when we got her, but I would have loved to see more of her, for her to be more of a presence. All of a sudden, yes, she knows he was cheating on her. Yes, she knows that she shouldn't have let it go on, but she did. We had a lot of great material with her that absolutely came out of nowhere and was unrealized potential. But he's like, oh no, we never would have. And it's not because she would have broken up, because she was African American. And there's all this prejudice against African Americans in this town. I'm like, but where did this come from? I need to know why this is all of a sudden such a big deal when it was never mentioned before. Stella says there's gotta have been somebody else that was there with her. So they turn and they look at Raven, because Raven was the one who had found Mila's phone, and the phone had been found on the grounds of this hotel vineyard, blah, blah, blah. Raven's like, well, you know what? I probably should be getting home by now. And this is the unraveling. If it hadn't already been unraveling for me already, this is the unraveling. Spoiler, Raven is the murderer. All of a sudden, Raven's just like, I'm gonna go home. My parents are gonna miss me, and sayonara. And she just takes off. What? Where did this come from? We could have had a more natural, organic segue into revealing that Raven was the murderer. And of course they're like, what is going on here? Where is Raven going? And then they notice. So the thing about these murders was the murderer would take the shoes off, or one shoe off, and remove the shoelaces. This is what Raven had done, and there were minor mentions of things about this serial killer which felt planted. Stella sees, so she and Mila, because they had been star runners and they, placed in top 10s or whatever, they got these special lavender shoes. So she sees the lavender laces poking out of Raven's pocket. I'm like, why is Raven still carrying these laces around? Maybe these were the pants that she'd been wearing when but you didn't wash these pants in the intervening weeks? Just this book. Oh, they were just, I don't know. But so she and Noah chase after Raven. They're able to capture Raven, and then we get Raven's perspective. And I'm just like, why? Why did I need to get Raven's confession from Raven's point of view? It would have been just as effective if we had gotten Raven's confession from either Ellie or Stella's point of view. It felt like it came from left field to get Raven's perspective. But the thing is, she buckled under the pressure, because when Shira left and then came back, Raven was now the one that was going to get them out of there. All their hopes and dreams were pinned on Raven because Raven is dependable. Raven is also extremely jealous of Stella and Ellie because of how good they are, and she knew she was never going to come in first place with them around, and that if they were still there, she had no chance of getting out, because her dad had split around the time of the whole Shira debacle. Her mom then had to take a menial wage job and move them into a crappy apartment, and this affected her entire lifestyle. So she has all these reasons. And she had heard Ellie confess to Mila about what had happened between herself and Noah. And so she's like, because she had already been plotting. From the summer, she'd been plotting ways to take Stella and Ellie out. And so she was like, this is a great opportunity. I have this secret about Ellie. I can use it to make her quit. And what can I do to injure Stella so that Stella can no longer run? Maybe I can get Mila in on it. Well, apparently Mila has too many scruples, so that wasn't going to work out. She also was on the trail, the morning that Ellie and Noah confronted Mila. After the other two left, she comes and Mila's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I need your help. My phone is not in here. My phone is wherever. And this is a little ambiguous, but I choose to believe it was intentional because of one thing that she says was that she tried, or she told herself that she tried. So she gets this branch that she's handing down to Mila. She loses her grip, and she told herself that she tried, but lost her grip. Mila falls back into the pit, cracks her skull, and this is why she dies. She has also become a threat to Raven because she's just as good, if not better, than Stella. So she's got to get all these girls out of the way so that she can be the best. On some level, I buy it. On some level, I'm like, this makes sense that Raven is behind everything. Because we get a mention here and we get a mention there about Raven. But on the whole, I thought that came out of left field. First, who's Raven? For majority of the book, I couldn't keep these girls straight. So all of a sudden, one of these almost nameless, faceless girls is our murderer? Just because what really sealed Mila's fate was Mila was thanking her, and she called her so reliable. Raven is so tired of being the reliable one because of what Shira had done. So because Shira went and made her choice, it prevented Raven from being anything other than reliable. Because now all the hopes and dreams were on her to succeed and get them out of their current economic state. And she was also, when she saw, because one of Mila's purple shoes had come off when she'd fallen into the pit, she saw this shoe and it enraged her in a sense because she was like, why would she wear such special, expensive shoes just to go running on a trail? Basically, Mila is unappreciative of what she has because now that Raven is poor, she has a new appreciation for expensive things and what they mean and how we need to be aware of what we have. And I'm like, Raven was not a big enough character for any of this to fly with me. So the end of the novel, so I was telling you it's all about the misogyny, all about how everybody gangs up on Stella because of the one guy pushing her down and giving her a concussion, how his father is now prejudiced against her because of the effect that it had on his son. Not to mention his son was probably doing all kinds of things in college that probably were not helping him out. So, his own future and his own fate were his own problem. And how the girls apparently, all of a sudden, the girls were the only ones with expectations, yet still nobody cared about the girls. So all of these girls then decide at this very last race, band together and decide not to run this last race. So, the whistle blows and nobody moves. The coach is enraged, but they're like, we're standing firm because nobody's going to mess around with us anymore. We're given the impression that maybe what Stella's going to end up doing is going to like a mid-tier university to run. I don't know, because she never ran this last race, so I don't know where that's going to end her. But This book, it was painful. It was so painful to get through. I thought if it had been more about this serial killer has reemerged and these two sisters use their talents to outrun him, figuratively and literally, it would have been a much better novel. I think if Mila had disappeared sooner, if the stakes had been higher sooner, it would have been better. There was so much happening that if we pared it down and focused in deeper onto certain areas, it would have been a more cohesive, effective novel. Somebody called this a fast-paced thriller. If anything, whether people liked this book or not, the one thing everybody agreed on was how slow it was. This was not a thriller by any stretch of the imagination. It was a mystery, but it was not a thriller. There was no thrill about it. There were no close calls. There were no brushes with death. There was nobody skulking in the shadows. This was not a thriller. No. That's how I feel about They'll Never Catch Us. How do you feel?